what you're looking for is sort of the turning point where I realized that like there are major opportunities. And I think there's 2 points that stand out. So the first was I heard that Grey Goose vodka sold for $672 million. Someone bought a liquor company for $700 million. What am I doing? How is that possible? And then the other point was MySpace selling for $582 million. When News Corp bought that, I was like, oh shit, I know something that I could have done. Like I built pages on that site. Like, where's my part of that? And so, yeah, at that point I was like, okay, cool. Let's get this money. And then getting arrested. I basically got him to be my lawyer in exchange for giving him an online presence. And at that point, I hadn't done a few side hustles. Like I built my barber's website, like whatever, just from like all the stuff I learned by doing. It was this dude named Rich who was like a crazy hustler, and he overheard me telling my barber about MySpace pages, and he was like, "Yo, could you like make a website?" And I had never really built a website. Like I had fucked around in Front Page, but I hadn't actually done it. And so he's like, I'll give you a couple $100. I'm like, yo, that's like a lot of haircuts. It's like what I earn in like a week working at this call center. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do it.
Perfect. So today we have Austin, who is a web developer and entrepreneur who's been fortunate enough to work on things used by millions of people for the last 12 years over his career. Products like OneSell.com, Review.com, and other personal projects. He's currently working as a software engineer, but spends his free time organizing an awesome conference called SuperConf with his wife, helping entrepreneurs and building out the future of the internet at quick note. His work has been featured in New York Times, Forbes, Business Insider, Miami Herald, Fastco, Entrepreneur, and a few others. And fun fact, he's an actual active angel investor. Austin, welcome. Welcome to the Mindset Warrior podcast. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I kind of want to dive right in. Hope we can be as raw as possible. And I want to know more about you. And if you can just like bring us back to your upbringing, like what it was like as a kid growing up. What type of kid were you?
Let's see. I was definitely a bad kid.
Okay.
Like sit in trees and throw rocks at cars type bad kid. One time we shoved a mango down my neighbor's exhaust thing. Another time we found out that there was a gas station behind the police station. Like there's a gas pump behind the police station that didn't have anyone there, like no guards, so you could just go up and fill your little thing, and no one would say anything. Yeah, definitely a little bit troublesome. I tried to break all the cameras at my elementary school because I felt like they were watching me. So I took a dodgeball and I started taking them out. I think that sums it up. And then I had a Latin upbringing. My mom is Peruvian. Dad wasn't really in the picture, so I spent a whole lot of time speaking Spanish, lived in Peru a little bit, and went there pretty much every summer until I was like 14 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you have siblings, or do you have siblings growing up?
I mean, so this is a complicated topic, but
okay.
Yeah, I do. They are half siblings, and I've never actually interacted with them face to face.
Okay. So would you say it was more like if you were kind of like a single child in a sense?
Definitely only child vibe.
Okay. All right. And like I guess you told us you're kind of like this troublesome kid. Um, and what happened, like what about like your teenage years? Or you all like throughout your teenage years you were also the same, or was it maybe just like earlier on?
Yeah, I would say more of the same. Things that are inappropriate for a podcast, but let's just say
Okay.
it got worse before it got better.
And like what was your uh I guess guiding light, or like what happened that maybe shifted that path to, like, I don't know, stopping some of those bad things, or what happened? If you could share a
Well,
bit about.
I would say is like a combination probably. So like my I don't know, somebody, maybe my grandfather got me a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was like 15 or 16.
Mhm.
And I read that, and you know, the idea of assets and liabilities was like mind blowing at that point. And so I started, you know, to sort of learn more because I had access to a computer. Um, and I went to like a seminar where like they started talking about all sorts of assets, and I learned about all sorts of crazy shit like charitable remainder trusts, which is like a way to protect your wealth once you have it by donating it all once you die, but controlling it until you die in a trust. Um, and you know, all sorts like tax liens, like you can in Broward they have like a 17% interest rate, and if you don't get paid back you can like foreclose on the property and all sorts of other crazy stuff. And I was like, this is wild. So that was like, okay, so there's a world sort of outside of, you know, all this whack shit that I'm doing. um, and then the internet being available was a big thing, right? Like I used LiveJournal for a bit, and I like learned how to customize it with CSS and, you know, just like all other LiveJournal people. um, and then I also looked started using MySpace, and that was really interesting as well. Same ideas, like, oh, I can, you know, customize this stuff and like all sorts of things. And then what else? Uh, and then getting arrested. Um, that was also, you know, pretty fucked. I wasn't like, no one really in my uh, family knows that I was arrested. Uh, it happened at a strange time in my life, essentially where I was like sort of homeless. Um, like I had got kicked out by my mom, and my grandparents were in Peru, so I didn't have a place to really stay. Uh, so I ended up, you know, staying in a friend's house, and then moving to a shed in another friend's backyard. Uh,
Insane. Okay.
and you know, at that point things were pretty tough, so I did what I had to do, and eventually I got arrested for something. But having to deal with that was uh, eye-opening. You know, I couldn't afford counsel. I didn't have guap like that, so I convinced a lawyer at the courthouse that was like, what's it called, serving, uh, you know, basically he was another client's lawyer, the guy in front of me, and it was a line. And so I started talking to him. I'm like, yo, I don't have a lawyer. I don't know, you know, what I'm going to do. He's like, uh, you know, well, what can you do for me? Like, let's try to work this out. And basically I talked him into representing me. That's the word I was looking for.
Okay.
Representing me that day. And he was like, all right. You know, he got me basically when you push the court date further along,
Okay.
an adjournment, I think it's called. Um, and then we went back to his office, and I basically got him to be my lawyer in exchange for giving him an online presence. Um,
Nice.
and and so at that point I had like done a few side hustles. Like I built my barber's website, like whatever, just from like all the stuff I learned by doing stuff on MySpace and LiveJournal. um but yeah, he got me out of it, and I was good to go. And from there, I met a girl on MySpace that I actually ended up meeting in real life, and we started dating. And her dad told me I should learn how to actually write software because I'm smart, but I don't seem, or sorry, I'm ambitious, but I don't seem too smart. So I should just like figure this out and make it work. And he gave me the opportunity to move to Germany. So yeah, I moved from Florida to Germany. I learned how to code in this guy's basement, and he gave me my first gig. And from there, it was off to the races.
Insane. So you just unloaded a ton. But going back to like where you're kind of living in a shed and like probably going through like a dark time and arrested, how old were you then, if you don't mind sharing? Like
18 or 19.
18 or 19? And then when did you first, when your grandfather gave you the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, how old were you then?
15 or 16.
15 or 16. So you kind of were introduced to like this whole like new world of business, or like, essentially the system that, could essentially work for you in a pretty cool way if you could figure it out. And that kind of introduced you to trying to experiment using some of the skills you had developed, right? Like learning how to customize MySpace. Like I remember those days. Awesome. So would you say that you were always kind of like from that moment on, or that period, you were kind of always like business minded? Like how can I earn something from serving or doing something or solving problems? Or was that something that you just kind of like figured out and got used to always thinking about?
Well, honestly, the first thing that I did that got me money was I was going to my barber, and it was this dude named Rich who was like a crazy hustler, and but he overheard me telling my barber about MySpace pages, and he was like, "Yo, could you like make a website?" And I had never really built a website. Like I had fucked around in Front Page, but I hadn't actually done it. And so he's like, "I'll give you a couple $100." I'm like, "Yo, that's like a lot of haircuts." And that's like what I earn in like a week working at this call center. Um, let me make this pop off for myself. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And it took me like a month, but it got done, and I was like, okay, so that paid me this much. I wonder, what I could do. And basically all it was just like a informational site. It was just like a HTML page.
No, that was like mind blowing for them, right? That gave him the edge back in the day, I guess, on all other barbers. But that's awesome. And like, I'm curious, like, I'm also like, I guess I grew up the same as you, single child. My upbringing, also have siblings. Um, where did you? Is that kind of where you learned this whole like concept of money? Because I guess like also was raised Latin in a sense, and money wasn't something like, the money like talk wasn't something that was constant. It was always like we don't have that much money, or it was like always this lack, right? Like this scarcity kind of like conversations that everybody's struggling and it's an issue. Is that kind of like where you discovered kind of like, hey, well, I could kind of be independent, or I could earn on my own? Is that?
I would definitely say that a lot of my family were just like employees.
Mm-hmm.
The only exception was my grandfather, who owned his own gas station. And so like for the most part, I thought like what you do is you get a job and it pays you. All right. But when I went to high school, I lived on like the school zoning border, right? So like I lived in the spot where it was not the high income area, but I went to the high income high school. And so in doing that, I got to see like a bunch of really rich kids. Like your dad bought you a full-on Acura TSX for your 16th birthday. And meanwhile, my mom's like, you gotta buy your car yourself. And so seeing that, I was like, how is this a thing? Like what's going on behind the scenes? So I started, making friends with the white Jewish kids. And, when I went to their house, like I would see mansions and I'd be like, oh, this is what a mansion looks like. And I would like talk to their parents and be like, so what do you do for work? And I started learning like, oh, real estate, I run a business. And I was just like, oh shit, okay, so there's this thing I learned, assets, liabilities, these people are using it. All right, seems like there's something here.
Connecting the dots.
Yeah.
Nice, man. And when you started to, I guess, like, it seems like you were then like super curious, right? Like you just ask a lot of questions. You seem like you were that type of kid or, person. Would you like agree with that?
Definitely a no fucks given type of kid. Like in math class, I was the kid that asked, when are we going to use this? I now know we're going to use it, just for the record. But you definitely don't think that when you're doing a squared plus b squared equals c squared.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what after like you learned to code, you're in Germany, you're kind of developing, I guess, your skill sets here. Did you at any point, were like you thinking about what you wanted to do with your life, or did any of that go through your mind? Or you just like, you know what, I just want to freaking figure this out, like this coding thing, and see where this takes me? Like what was your, I guess, like what was your mindset there, right? Because a lot of people, when they start learning skills, like, and they have someone like the experience that you've had where you connected the dots, you kind of saw this future opportunity that you wanted, like you're an ambitious person, but then it's like you're not sure, there's so many things you could do. What was your mindset at that point?
So in Germany, I was just heads down trying to like not drown in all the information I was learning, because I wasn't, he didn't, like, the opportunity wasn't someone's going to teach you to code. It was like, here's some dude online, here's a bunch of books, here's an O'Reilly library, good luck. And the O'Reilly library was like every O'Reilly book ever. It was like OCaml for beginners, and like, Java patterns, Java ORM patterns, and like all sorts of random shit. So I had to like started reading a couple books. Like I read like a Java book, and it took me like a week to get past like the first chapter. And then I did like the hello world of that. And I was like, okay, cool. This is great. Like I could print words to a screen. And then by chance, I like found something online about PHP, and I did a hello world in an hour. And I was like, all right, there's a big difference here. Let me, try to figure out the fastest way. So I was really just trying to make sense of like all the vocab and everything that I had thrown at me. But I think what you're looking for is sort of the turning point where I realized that like there are major opportunities. And I think there's 2 points that stand out. And I don't know which one came first, but I'll just spit them out. So the first was, I heard that Grey Goose vodka sold for $672 million. And I was like, someone bought a liquor company for $700 million? What am I doing? How is that possible? And then I was like, okay, uh, that's a very large amount of money. I wonder how hard it is to actually make a liquor. And I started looking up how to make your own liquor online. Found out you could use potatoes, and that's how you make vodka and all sorts of shit. Uh, but anyway, that was one point, and then the other point was MySpace selling for 582 million. When News Corp bought that, I was like, oh shit, I know something that I could have done. Like I built pages on that site. Like, where's my part of that? And so, yeah, at that point, I was like, okay, cool. Let's get this money. Up until then, I had been thinking like, oh, maybe I could make like $1 million or something by selling T-shirts on the internet, right?
And what did you, I guess that realization helped you see, okay, there's a huge opportunity, huge potential, and you're like developing this skill set. Were you I mean, like coding takes a lot of patience and like, I would say persistence and determination, right? At the end of the day, would you consider yourself like when you were starting to do that, did you ever have like, what the hell am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? Or were you like, dude, I sold a barber website for like a few $100. Like, there's no going back. Like, this is where this is where the money's at. I don't give a shit how long is it gonna take. I'm gonna figure this out. Like, what was your?
It was sort of neither. Like, I didn't have long-term vision. Um, like, it was just sort of, this guy tells me he can give me a job, so I should do whatever I can to make money. Like, I'm out here in Germany. I don't really have too many options. I could, I guess, go home, but then what? I don't know. Go to college. I don't know. So I at that point I had already dropped out of college.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, what was your concept of going to college, right? Probably distorted, since you were like this kind of, you challenged authority, and you also kind of saw that you didn't need it, and I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I saw that I didn't need it, but it was more of like, I applied to a handful of schools. I got into a few. I didn't have any financial help. So I could have applied for like Pell Grant and maybe gotten it, but that seemed like a lot of work. And the easier way was loans. And I didn't have like a clear idea of like, I want to do this, right? Like I thought at the time, I was like, maybe I'll do business, maybe. But it was like a community college, and I went to the orientation, and I was like, this doesn't feel right. I'm not sure. And then I never went back.
So that's when you dropped out, the orientation.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I was enrolled. I had my schedule, orientation, never went back.
That's awesome. And I guess, like, how long did you last in Germany? Just
I
curious.
was there for 8 months, 9 months. So let's see. Uh, February to October. Yeah.
And did you come back to the States and start working, or like what?
Yeah. So
I mean, at that point, you might like, what was happening? Were you just like, all right, I'm on my own, I need to figure this out and get a gig now, or were you still working for the guy?
No. So I did the job for, it was a company called Bombardier. He just had me set up like something called a JotSpot instance. Google eventually bought that company, but he had me set up this thing called a JotSpot instance because what was happening was they had engineering teams in Canada, Quebec, and then in France, and they were sending 3D AutoCAD files on DVDs over the Atlantic Ocean in order to collaborate. And sorry, one second. I want to set this to do not disturb so I don't get Yeah. So what he had me do is just set up a server to have them, upload the file instead of send the DVD over the ocean.
Insane.
And so that was like my one gig there. I set that up. Apparently it was a success. And then I came home and I stayed with my grandparents. My ex also stayed with her aunt and uncle. And I searched on Craigslist for jobs. So I started searching on Craigslist, and then eventually I found some sucker that was dumb enough to give me a job, even though I didn't know what I was doing. But the interview was basically, I took a flash drive with some HTML and CSS and JavaScript that showed like fancy animations, and that was how I got in the door.
Nice. And like, I guess I want to fast forward. Like, I mean, sure you had like multiple gigs throughout kind of like your, I guess your professional career, right? As a developer, like what led you to starting up like your next, I would say like your next side hustle or business idea? Or were you thinking about it when you were doing all these jobs just to like pay the bills and get by and stuff? Or were you thinking about like, what's next? What can I do?
I never really thought of it so much as like, how do I get rich? Insofar as I thought about like cool or crazy or silly ideas that, I wanted to try. So like, I, at one point, actually in Germany, this was pretty cool, pretty crazy. In Germany, have you ever heard of Bape, B-A-P-E, the clothing brand?
Yeah.
So I found a plug on some Alibaba-like site way back when. It wasn't Alibaba. And I didn't realize it at the time, but it was fake. And so I started a site with a piece of software called OS Commerce, because I told you I had learned PHP. And I put it online and I started talking about it in forums, and I started emailing sites that had like Bape related content, and a couple of them linked to me, and I got to the first page of Google for Bape outlet, because the website I bought was bapeoutlet.com. And so I started making like, the first month was like 1,000, then the second month was 2,000, the third month was like 3, and then I got to as high as like 5,500, and it was just like money coming in. It was I had like 100% margin, so, or not 100, 50% margin. Like I was making half or double the money that I spent, and I was just like, this is really cool. And then I got some product delivered to Germany where I was living, and I realized it was fake, and I was like, oh shit. But I was like, I'm making like $2,200 a month doing nothing. I don't do anything. I just, like, it was drop ship.
Yeah. Damn. Okay.
And then a lawyer bought something from, I think it was Skadden LLP. And I looked at their client list, and Nigo, the founder of Bape, was on their client list. And I freaked out. I was like, all right, I got to shut this down. I don't have any money for lawyers.
And did you survive? Did they come after you? Did they send you anything?
No. They didn't send me any cease and desist or anything. Okay. I think it might have been a lawyer buying some Bape for their son or something.
But you had like this like ethical like moment, or like, do I do this? Do I want to go back to that situation where I'm like trying to convince lawyers to like represent?
Yeah, I mean, in reality, at that point, I had known for like 2 months that, it wasn't real. It was the threat of like, do I want to deal with this headache that was like nah, let's shut it down. So I shut it down. I made sure everyone got their orders, and then that was it.
So like I mean, you alluded to like a really cool, I think, business point that took me a while to learn. Like you don't want to just always do it. Your driving reason to do something is not essentially always the money, but essentially it's like that curiosity of just being able to create and to do something like that you know maybe thought of at least that could lead to earning money, whether it's like small amounts or large amounts. Um, did you, like after doing that experiment, is that kind of like, did that fuel you to like continue to do things, right? Because like,
Dude, that high is a high that I have been chasing for like a long time. Like when you build something and people use it, it's crazy. It's so cool. Like,
I mean, expand on that a little bit, because like entrepreneurship and all this like online business stuff, it's like it's been like trending, right? It's like a thing, and I feel like there's a lot of what you just said like missing from the story, right? Like it's not about making millions and just putting up a site and trying to sell something, but it's not always about that. But the beauty of like creating something new or creating, and like you mentioned, like that high that gives you, man, it took me so long to just freaking understand, because all I was just like, oh, I want to be like wealthy and in a different situation. And I completely agree with you. Like, I remember when we were doing, I was helping a friend with a beer festival, and like to see like thousands of people freaking show up, I was like, like I convinced all these freaking people to like pay and then come to this thing. And it was like a shitty ass day. Like it was like raining, gray. Like I was like, this is not gonna work. No one's gonna come. And then boom, like sold out. That was like, I completely 100% agree.
yeah, it's like every single person walking in the door is another dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm. Like, you want to give me money to come inside? Awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
So I could see how that is like for digital products, online tools, and stuff like that. Like, I mean, I'm assuming after that, were you just like trying to pump out the next things? Like, what's your mindset now that you have this? I would say like a professional confidence in your abilities. Like, did you kind of have maybe a little kind of all right now this year, or a little more long-term plan, or like what was it? You just like,
Yeah, no. So back then,
like paying bills and dealing with everything.
so back then, like I told you, I convinced them to give me a job. It was like $35,000 a year, and that was like enough to pay for gas and handle some stuff. And then I tried to get my my ex-girlfriend on her feet, and she was able to do that. So we moved in together, and that gave me like a whole lot of more time to think, right? Because like when you live with your parents, they're just like asking you to take out the trash and pull the weeds and all sorts of dumb shit, check the mail. And like, if you can have a concentrated block of time in your day where you're just uninterrupted by anything, it's massive for thinking and productivity, in my opinion. And so moving out of my grandparents and in with my ex-girlfriend, I had that space where like, I could tell her when she got home, like after dinner, I'm going to work from this time till 2 a.m. And I could just have time to just fuck around on the internet, to learn new things, to build stuff. And that's what I did. I used my time to just fire off random ideas that I had. So one of them, for instance, was back in the early 2000 or late 2000s, like between 2005, 2010, you could put a phone number, an @ symbol, and then a gateway, which is like, sms.tmobile.net.
Mm-hmm.
And it would send a text message to that person for free. And so I found out about this just like, I don't know, one night random on random forums. And I was like, I'm going to build a site that's going to let anybody send a text message for free. So I did that. I built a site that let anybody send a text message for free. And I put it up, and I used it. Some friends used it, random people used it, just like, it wasn't like the most popular site in the world, but apparently hackers found it. And they realized that I had a vulnerability in my code that allowed them to not put a phone number, but an email, and not choose one of the predetermined gateways, but a domain, and they could send free emails now. So they then used my service to spam the fuck out of tens of thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, until that IP got blacklisted. My my hosting provider left me a bunch of really nasty voicemails telling me about how I'm ruining his business and all sorts of shit. And he wanted to charge me like $500 and da 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 da. And I was like, no, I don't think that's gonna happen. And poor guy, and I feel for him. That was kind of the Wild West, but there was no way I was gonna pay $500. So he let me keep my VPS, but he restricted the things my PHP install was allowed to do. And like, no, not sending email anymore. Yeah. And so I just fired off a bunch of projects like that, just like random stuff. A lot of stuff I don't even remember, but yeah.
Did you what led to your next like actual feasible business, or was it that you then went to maybe get a better gig where you earned more and got like kind of leveled up your skill set? What was your path to doing that? Because I'm assuming like you're probably getting better at obviously development as you're pumping out all these projects, even though that maybe not a lot of people are using them, or you're not really dedicating a lot more time to sustaining them and growing them, but you're just getting reps in, right? And
yeah, so I got a whole lot of reps in. Because not only was I doing side projects, but I was leveling up at work like crazy, because they had me doing all sorts of shit that I had never done before. And then I left that role and I ended up at a different company. The second one was rushmypassport.com. And rushmypassport.com is exactly what it sounds like. And they put me in as a sole developer with already built software to manage the entire software platform by myself, and to manage their entire ad spend on Google AdWords. Back then, MSN had a tool, and Yahoo had a tool. So I was super leveling up. I didn't know you're not supposed to have one person managing the ads.
Like 4 full-time jobs.
Yeah. And so I learned enough to help the company reach profitability on their ad spend. And I built all sorts of crazy stuff. Well, back then it was crazy. Now it's like really trivial, but I built a few things. I built a customer service app that the answering service could use after hours. So people would call not during business hours, and we would forward them to an answering service, and they needed an interface to look up an order by email or order ID, and then see the status of like if the product was shipped, if the passport was shipped, or if we received it or whatever. And so I built that. And then another thing I built was, we were paying a lady. This was her whole job. She would go to our CRM, like the app that was built, take the user's address, the customer's address, and then open a new tab, go to FedEx, and then type the user's address in there, paste it, and then hit print label, and then print the label, and save it as a PDF, and then send it to the customer via email. And so that was like a prime example of like, this person's job doesn't need to exist because software could do all of that.
Yeah.
And so they had me build that, and then she got promoted to customer service manager.
Nice.
but for a second there I was kind of worried. But anyway, so the high level idea here is that I was just like building all sorts of stuff I had never built before. Like I learned about base64 encoding and like API calls and all sorts of crap.
Yeah. What would you say? Because like I want to just like pause there a little bit and expand on this concept, right? Because like I've seen a lot of people that are, I guess would use a feel stuck, right? They're doing their gigs and maybe they haven't had like that mindset of, oh, like I can go and just try a bunch of different things out. And even if it doesn't yield some return or it's not like this massive success, it's not about that, right? It's about, I'm just getting practice and I'm putting stuff out there, and there's like this, you're not emotionally attached to this thing, right? Like you're just doing it to do it. And there's like this, I would say like this, I've seen people like, yeah, I've probably participated in myself like years back where like you're fixed minded on this thing and you get so attached to it, right? Because you invest time and stuff. But and in reality, you're kind of like almost sabotaging your success, right? Because you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. And I've seen people that end up losing motivation on projects, I'm including myself, and you just essentially stop doing them. And then you kind of have that like mental like, it was a failure, and this whole like story happens when in reality you're just putting in another rep, like, and then focusing on like the positives of that, right? Where you leveled up on something, you learned something new that you're now going to transfer into the next thing, right? Like, I mean, would you agree on that, or like, do you see that? Have you seen that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, some people are definitely, thinking like I can't say this, definitively. So not definitely, but it feels like for me that some people do really take the things that they're working on as like serious endeavors that need to succeed, and failure hurts, and that's one way of thinking. For me, during all this stuff, it was never like, this is my ticket to make $1 million. Like some of this stuff I had no idea. Some of this stuff I was like, it would be cool if this existed. And some of this stuff was like, there's a new cool technology, sort of that's coming out. Let me screw with it to try to learn. And so throughout all these different projects that I had varying motivations, but the main common thread is I'm just following my interest. Like whatever's interesting, I want to learn more about and do more stuff with.
Do you think that like gave you, I would just like this like creative freedom to,
for sure, yeah,
like, just like go? Because I mean, I could see how like I guess when I started to explore and do things, like I would put so much pressure on myself, right? Like, hey, I got to do this or it's got to succeed, and I didn't know this, like what you're sharing about. It took me a while to understand that and really see like the actual freedom that you do have when you put something out, or like, hey, check this out. Like this podcast is a really good example of that, of just like having conversations with people that I admire and that are doing really cool stuff, but also I want people to, and I hope people get this out of this, is like, normal people are, doing like living their normal lives, but have this way of thinking about things that gives them an advantage, or, it's a different message that maybe isn't being shared right now. So that was like my hopes in doing this, where we get to highlight that, like what you just said, and it's like super liberating.
Yeah, when you just do the thing that you want to do, it's pretty cool, right? The beer festival is a perfect example of that. Yeah.
Now, I guess like what was like next for you? Did you, I mean, obviously you're in this creative sphere, doing multiple projects. Did you at one point kind of say, okay, now I want to try actually establishing a business? doing, actually building something for myself and seeing where it goes and maybe just solely dedicating time to that thing. And what helped you make that decision?
So I would say my time at Expedited Travel, which is also known as Rush My Passport, was definitely a pretty illuminating time. Um, because doing all that work, it made me realize that like, hey, I'm having a material effect on whether this business succeeds or fails. Before that moment, I was just a cog in a machine learning how to make one part of it work better, right? Like at the company before Rush My Passport closed first, they literally just had me working on like a, a, a portal for passing information from one spot to another in our network, right? And then before that, I was just, again, how do I get files from point A to point B? And so up until that point, I hadn't realized that like I have, you know, really big superpowers, right? Like creating software is very powerful and you can do a lot with it. Like this company was losing some amount of money when I started, and now it's making X amount. Um, and so realizing that was like pretty dope. And all my side projects also pretty dope. Like the iPhone had come out, and actually one of my coworkers at Rush My Passport, Kent Anderson, he was like, Apple is the best company in the world, because I had been a Windows person up until that time. You know, if you're low income, you tend to be Windows first. And so being a Windows person, I was like, what are you talking about? I had just got my Windows T-Mobile Dash, and it was pretty badass. Like you could have like live streaming and all sorts of pretty cool shit on there. It had like a full QWERTY keyboard. It had a web browser. It was like a proper smartphone. And then he pulled this fucking iPhone out at work one day, and I was like, holy shit, what the fuck is this? And he was like, I love Apple. Apple's the best, And, so a little background on this guy. His dad sold a bank to Bank of America for hundreds of millions of dollars. So like he was rich kid. So he had plenty of money to, play with devices that are awesome. And so seeing that, I was like, oh fuck, I need to get an Apple. At that point, it was like right at that point I was leaving Rush My Passport, and in my in-between time between Rush My Passport and whatever my next thing was, I built an iPhone framework that was for the web. There was no iPhone apps, the first iPhone. So I built an iPhone web app framework, and basically all it did was allow you to build iPhone web apps really quickly if they fit into like a few different templates, right? So like if you need a list, if you need like a search box, if you need whatever, if you need some basic UI components that are already part of the iPhone, you can just use this and it'll work for you. And I did that over like 2 weeks. I released it, pushed it out to like Hacker News and whatever stuff. And, people liked it. I think it got like 50,000 downloads. Back then, GitHub wasn't like a popular thing. I put it on code.google.com because that's where code used to live. And then I got a new job. But that little framework actually allowed me on Thanksgiving during my new job to build an iPhone app that connected to Zillow and allowed you to search on the go any house that you're at. And then you could see the value of the house, look at it on a map, see what the school score was, see what the walkability score was. And I sent that out again to a handful of people, and it went crazy. Like over the course of a year, I had 1 million users of that app. New York Times wrote about it. NBC wrote about it. And, sort of that was like my first project where like I had a real scale, right? Like it was like, whoa, 1 million people want to use this. And then Zillow came and they bought it from me. And that was like, holy fuck, I didn't make a lot of money from this, but goddamn, I built a thing. It got featured in the New York Times and it was acquired. This is nuts. How can I do this again, but like 150 times bigger?
Dude, that's amazing, man. That's like, I mean, that was ahead of its time too, right? For Zillow to come and acquire that. They
I don't think that it was ahead of its time, right? Like you think about it like this, right? So if you're Zillow and you have this API and you see one developer develops for a particular platform on top of it and it's getting 1 million users, you're like, I should probably do this in-house.
Hire him or buy it off him.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's awesome, man. Like, would you say like after that you were now, did that change like how you viewed the projects that you were now going to be working on?
It definitely let me see that every project can have big upside if you let it have upside. But the way that project, I'll definitely answer that question. But the way the project started was actually just, I had built the framework out of interest in iPhone, and Google Cloud gave me a bunch of free credits when they first launched, and I wanted to understand how the Google Cloud platform worked. So anyway, your question.
Yeah, I was just saying like, where if you can expand on choosing projects that can have upside, like I guess like the thinking that goes into that, right? Because now you're being more selective about where you're dedicating your time, and not necessarily for the money, but just for that. I guess it's like for the high, right? Because like that's a pretty dope ass feeling. That's a pretty awesome feeling that you want to try to like recreate. I mean, being featured and getting acquired, that's awesome.
Yes. Yeah, it's like just the users is really what does it for me, right? Like I built this thing, I put it out, and people are using it literally all over the entire United States. Like at all times of the day, I'm sleeping, someone's touching it. I wake up, someone's touching it. I'm eating lunch, someone is using my app right now.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But I would actually say while that change did happen there, I've since come back to my original sort of motivations, which are just, I like following my interest. So I would say you shouldn't try to build projects with upside, because projects with upside will appear when you follow your interest.
There you go. Okay, awesome. So do you mean like you kind of pivoted a little bit to try this new finding projects with upside, and like what was a negative, like what were the lessons learned during that time? I mean, like that period.
Oh man, I built so many projects trying to make them something that, would be a viable business. So, meanwhile, I had like a full-on career. Like I was building stuff. I joined a startup, and I was the first engineer for my third or fourth job, however you want to think about it. I was the first engineer. I built this whole thing from scratch. It was a CRM. The founder of that company is now a really good friend of mine. But we built this CRM. It was called Dashboard. Got featured in TechCrunch and a handful of other places. But the interesting thing was that I just started building these other projects trying to find upside. And so some of the projects that I built that didn't work out were, I wanted to do a food delivery app because there was no food delivery apps back then, right? There wasn't Uber Eats or DoorDash. Yeah. There was only a company in New York called Seamless, and they were only in New York. And then there was one up in Chicago called Grubhub. And I was like, yo, I want to build an app so I could get my food delivered. So I built it, and I put it out there, and it was really hard to like get restaurants to sign up. It was hard to find customers. Like I flyered the fuck out of neighborhoods, like literally probably 100,000 flyers. And I ended up with like 50 customers, and I was like, are you kidding? And so, but the other downside to that was like, I had a co-founder, but we didn't have delivery drivers. So like if an order came in, it was me waking up and going to deliver it, or, you know, stopping whatever I'm doing to deliver it. And so, you know, that was like one failure. Another one was like, I was like, all right, so I don't want to do things that involve me having to do physical labor. So let me try this other idea. And at that point, there was no airdrop, right? You couldn't just send a file from your computer to your phone unless you had Dropbox. And even then, you know, it had to be a file. And what I noticed was like a lot of times when I like look up a doctor on my insurance company, or like I look up a restaurant like Outback Steakhouse or whatever, like I go to their website, I look for locations, I find the phone number and I call, or I find the address, and then I have to like grab my phone, unlock it, go to the Maps app, look at the screen, type it in, hit save, and then I'm ready to go. And so I was like, what if I could just build a little widget that is under every Google map that allows you to send to a device the specific address and map app, right? So I had a little BlackBerry icon, a little Android icon, a little Apple icon, because back then you could only open a map if it was the app's or the phone's native map app. So I built that and I deployed it. I called it MapperMe. And again, I was looking for upside. I was like, thousands of businesses could use this. And at first I just put it for free, and a bunch of, you know, organizations used it. I wouldn't say businesses. And I started looking at usage, and it was like churches, like charities, like people I wouldn't be like, yo, pay me money. So after a while, I just emailed them and I'm like, in 3 months, this is going to get shut down. I ended up getting like 450-ish like addresses into the app, and I ended up doing like, I don't know, 50,000 text messages over the course of a year, and I paid for all of those out of my own pocket. And I never charge anybody. But interesting side note on this, there actually was an upside in that idea. A guy named Tyler Tringus built a much better version of this, and he sold it for lots of money. Yeah.
Did you find out later on, or was that like after you shut down, or?
Yeah, it was much later on. I didn't find out about it until my friend Brian Breslin, he sent me a link like 2 years after I shut down MapperMe, and he was like, hey, check this out. He's like, this company is doing $50,000 a month. Are you kidding?
So you built Uber Eats, man, like way back when, and look at now, right? Shit. But what's the you alluded to something earlier, right? Like where you essentially were just like breaking it down, how you became kind of an asset to this company, right? The one where you were doing kind of like 4 full-time jobs, so you built out their entire software stack, maintenance, support, security, and also manage their marketing ad spend dollars. That's insane. What was the lesson? What's the lesson there, right? I mean, you realize like, oh shit, like your worth, right? Like your value. What would you, I guess, share with others, like advice on becoming an asset to a company, or, you know, assessing whether like maybe they should change roles or pivot to other careers, or completely just change their outlook on what they're doing, right? Because in a sense, it's business too, right? So at the end of the day, I mean, we're living in times right now where we're seeing a lot of people like get let go, right? And managers and executives are having to choose who is gonna get let go and who they need to keep, right? So I think this alludes to the point. I don't know if you could share maybe just like what's your advice, because I think it'll resonate right now with people on becoming
Yeah.
and doing stuff about it.
So this is tough, right? Because people are affected by this in a big way, and I don't like a lot like the people that are dealing with this right now. It's mostly out of their reach, out of their control, in my opinion. And so, like there's only so much you can do. So with that said, I would actually say just do your best work. Like do the best that you can and be proud of the work that you're producing. But more importantly, think about doing things outside of work that you're interested in, right? Like, and that doesn't need to be start a business. It could be like post stories to Instagram, right? Like whatever it is that you find interesting. It could be, literally it could be like post stories about how to play tennis to Instagram. And if enough people find that interesting, you'll know. And it could also be like put a store on Etsy. It could be like write a comic and put it on Gumroad. Like there's many existing platforms that allow you to just monetize whatever it is that you're interested in. So just being a creator in general outside of your job is pretty important. And so, I think that's a really important piece of career advice generally. So like you should probably either blog or tweet or post to Instagram or, create content, videos that are interesting to you. And then go from there. Create software, right? Like create, period, outside of work.
And like, I mean, we kind of touched on this a bit, but for someone that, let's say, is going to start creating, what would you say is like, what would you tell them to keep creating, right? Because in the beginning, there's usually maybe not that immediate reaction from people, right? Like you're creating and maybe a lot of people ignore you or don't pay attention to you. But what would you suggest? Like, what would you recommend they focus on?
Things that you're interested in.
Right.
Because if you do something that you're not interested in, then you're gonna lose motivation when people don't give you the attention that you're thinking or like creating to get attention is not the goal. Creating because you think it's useful and helpful, that's the goal.
Yeah, I think that's gold what you just said. Creating to not get attention, man. Like creating just because you want to, you find value, you just want to do it. Right? That is, a lot of people don't think that adds so much value to yourself because you're like developing yourself, your skill set. I think that sometimes that's overlooked a lot actually. That's huge, man. Awesome. I know we're kind of running to the end of the call, but I kind of wanted to know, like, and you kind of touched on it, like what other practical advice not just to the people that maybe have lost their jobs, but like for maybe developers, right? Because that's something that you feel in. Like, what would you suggest they be doing right now during this time where it seems uncertain? I've heard that of some developers also getting let go, even though they have a valuable skill, right? That is in high demand and in shortage of, but they're still getting let go. What would you, I guess, like suggest for them or speak on, in regards to that?
Yeah, I mean, the economy is in a strange place because it's basically on life support. Uh, for developers, like, full disclaimer, I don't feel qualified to give this advice, but I'll try to answer your question.
Or your opinion.
Yeah. So for me personally, the things that I'm thinking about are, how can I hedge against inflation? Because there's a large amount of money being deployed by the government, but not necessarily a large amount of goods and services to match that amount of money being deployed. And so I think about Bitcoin quite a bit. uh, I also think about other sort of trustless stuff. So Ethereum is a really cool platform to build on top of. I'm thinking more generally how to create things that people find useful. And then I'm trying to do my best work. And then lastly, I'm still and always am trying to level up. I just bought a book on D3JS. So I bought that last night at like 2 a.m.
Nice. For sure. Well, I want to ask you a kind of a random question. I mean, and I did want to touch on before we, kind of like get to the end of the call, is one, like, how do you sustain your tenacity and focus? I mean, you're in a position where, like, you have a lot of experience, you're highly capable, many wins on your belt. Like, how are you maintaining your focus and tenacity? Because I know you're working as a software engineer, and on top of that, you're doing a conference. You just did a conference, and on top of that, you have other gigs going on. Like, how the heck do you do everything in the same, however many functioning hours you operate in, maybe like 18 hours max, I'd say.
Yeah. So I think a friend of mine, his name is Josh. He works right now probably at Pinterest, maybe Airbnb. Anyway, he's Goat Slacker on Twitter. I've known him for quite a while, and I have really admired his productivity for a long time. He's an open source software engineer, works for a large company like Facebook or Airbnb or Pinterest. And he has 3 children, and he has a startup. And so I asked him when I was hanging out with him, I'm like, dude, how in the fuck are you so productive? Like, I see your commits. I see, the new stuff you're pushing out at work, and I see the new stuff you're creating for your startup, and I see you posting on Instagram about your kids and how happy they are. How are you managing this? And he told me 2 things. One, I don't waste any time. If I'm on my way to work and there's Wi-Fi, I'm working on either open source or my startup. At work, I'm focused on work, and I'm leaving as soon as my tasks are complete. And at home, after I feed the kids, after I bathe them, after I play with them, I focus on, my startup or my open source work. And the second thing is, I have an excellent partner at home. My wife is awesome. So those 2 things, like the partner you choose and not wasting any time, are a great way to like master focus. So if you, for me personally, what this looks like is I don't have a TV in my apartment. Like, if I want to watch something on Netflix, I gotta cramp up and like crane my neck in bed to watch it on my computer, and it's uncomfortable. So I realized, like, I really want to watch this if I'm gonna do it. And then having distraction fighting apps. So on my computer, like I've modified my etc. host file. So if I go to Facebook, it shows me something that says like get back to work. And on my Instagram, I have two things. Like I have the in Instagram notification that I've been using it for 15 minutes. And then I have the app level disabled after an hour. And so basically I try to limit distractions, and I try to just work all day and get things done.
And because you're doing the work that you like and are interested in, it doesn't like burn you out or it's like suck your energy.
Yeah.
I would assume that's the only way you can sustain.
Yeah, long hours. I don't do long hours. That's the other thing. I only do like 8 to 10 hours basically in a day. Like 18-hour days, 16-hour days. That is a thing of the past for me. There are days when I do like 6-hour days. And that is because I don't want to burn out, because burnout, I think, doesn't come necessarily from working on things you don't want to work on, or anything other than physically exerting yourself or mentally exerting yourself for large periods of time. So if you are doing, like something that is very taxing mentally, and you're doing it for all day, let's just say 10 hours, your next day is going to be a little bit harder. And also getting good sleep is important.
For sure. No, awesome. Good advice, man. And I mean, I know that I definitely wanted to ask you about the project that you're currently working on. I mean,
cool.
It's freaking amazing.
Yeah.
And I was hoping you could share just like about that.
Yeah, I'll gladly plug.
I think, no, please do. And please, like at the end, like, I want people to know where they can like connect with you and, hopefully people see this. I plan on sharing this on all platforms. And yeah, I don't know, maybe talk about what you got going on right now. I know I mentioned them in the beginning, but you just had SuperConf, so tell us about that. A lot of challenges in that, and then QuickNode. So yeah.
Cool. So SuperConf, I actually started after the Future of Web Apps left in 2011. Yeah. And it's a conference for web developers, designers, and entrepreneurs. We've had really awesome speakers like Brad Feld from Techstars. We've had Neil Patel. We've had Adam Dogeli, who's a Forbes 30 under 30. We've had Drew Wilson, who sold his company to GoDaddy. We've had some really great engineers from GitHub, Zach and Ben. We had the founder of Sentry speak. So the speakers have always been really cool. And there's also a company launch portion. And we've had companies that have been acquired by Facebook, Amazon, Pluralsight, Net2Phone, and a few others, 5 stars, loyalty card. They've all launched at SuperConf, so that's been really awesome. This year has been a little bit of a trip because coronavirus made us cancel the conference, so we've resolved to actually split it. We did the first part fully digital, so that's the company launches, and we have some really, really strong companies this year. Companies like Artify, Sustalytics, SalesAmp, Approvely, PTO Genius, CommandDot, Funday, and I'm missing one, CargoLogic. I'm pretty sure out of that batch, at least 4 of them are going to be worth like tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions. So I'm really excited to see where they go. And then we have delayed, we don't have a date yet. We have delayed the in-person portion of SuperConf to later in the year. And yeah, you can learn more about that at superconf.com. A winner will be announced for launch competition probably this upcoming week. And yeah, we will hopefully, I don't know how we're gonna make this happen, but we had the co-founder of Spotify, his name is Rasmus Anderson. That guy's a fucking total badass. Scheduled, we had a former design director from Coinbase, Connie Yang, scheduled. We had Jillian Morris, who's the creator of the Hit List app. And if you have ever used the Wander tab plugin for Chrome, it shows you a cool place and excellent flight deal every time you open a new tab. She was scheduled. Stoney Baptiste, the partner at Urban Us, was scheduled. Excellent speakers. I'm really bummed that we have to reschedule because we're definitely going to lose some of them, but I'm going to do my best to bring them all back. Yeah, so that's SuperConf. And then QuickNode is basically, you can think of it as like a Heroku for blockchain nodes. So we allow people to very quickly and easily boot a synced blockchain node, either dedicated or cloud. So we run infrastructure that powers really huge, what are called dApps, decentralized applications. We're doing about 500 million requests per month at the moment, and we are growing pretty nicely. Some of our customers include Token Tax, what's another one? Local Cryptos, Dharma has used us. So yeah, they are pretty awesome, and we think that the crypto wave is just coming back, and we're gonna have a really great product. I mean, we have a pretty great product, but we're continuing to improve on it every day, and we have high hopes for the future. And just out of personal curiosity, this is like the ultimate product for me to work on because I love crypto a lot. I've built a bunch of other crypto related products, and this is definitely a needed infrastructure play.
Would you say, like, because I know you had a few like projects, I guess, like fun projects that you were experimenting with. Would you say those led to this moment or where you're at now?
Yeah, definitely a sort of a combination of things. So the people that started QuickNode have actually been my friends for quite a while. I met them through one of my best friends, Manny, who actually, I worked with him for like a year and a half, and he just became literally one of my best friends, and he worked with these guys previously, so I knew them. But the other thing that sort of led to this was I started messing around with crypto in sort of like a more inquisitive way in 2017 when things started going crazy. And then in 2017, late 2017, me and Mario Aguayo, who we used to work with, and PK Banks, we built just a toy app. It was like a silly thing. So I had found this thing called Crypto Roulette, and it was like this thing where you just click a button and it would spin and show you, if you bought these 5 cryptos at the beginning of 2017, this is how much money you would have right now. And we were just in the office at WinCode, and we're like, wouldn't it be wild if you could actually just like click a button, pay somebody, and they'll give you all these cryptos? And so we built that in a weekend, and then it was written up in Forbes, it was written up in the Next Web, and like it went kind of viral. We made like $45,000 in a month and a half. And we quit. We all quit WinCode. We raised money from ex PayPal, Jason Portnoy, and we tried to make that business work, and then that didn't work, and we ended up doing a crypto wallet that was sort of like Venmo for crypto, and that didn't work, and then we shut down the company. Well, we didn't shut down the company. We pivoted into something that wasn't as attractive for me. It was vape delivery. So you could get like a Juul pod delivered at like midnight, and people love that one, but it wasn't a business that I was like super passionate about.
Yeah. And like, where do you see, or what's your role in QuickNode, by the way?
Just, we are not big on titles. You could just say co-founder, technical co-founder.
You're working on the product itself, or are you managing a team?
No, I mean, I'm working on the product, and my friend Alan is working on some stuff there too.
Nice, man. Well, I mean, we touched on a bunch of things. You actually shared a lot of things I didn't know by yourself, and I think hopefully the listeners will find it, will resonate with a lot of the value points that you mentioned. So definitely thank you for taking the time on a Saturday to meet with me and to discuss all these random things, your career, and I think a lot of the things that were super interesting to me, and just like good reminders as we're all facing like challenging times. It's refreshing to hear some of these tips and advice from a person like yourself. So definitely thank you for coming on, man, and being part of this.
No problem. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, dude. It was good to catch up.
Yeah, man, for sure. It's refreshing. I have to do it again. But this time I want El Bagel.
Nice. That's actually where I'm going to go after this.
Epic, dude. All right, man. Take care.
All right. See ya. Bye.
Yeah.